In recent days, a staggering disruption sent shockwaves through global financial markets as over $1.4 trillion vanished from the stock market in just a matter of hours. What makes this episode particularly remarkable is that it was not triggered by a conventional financial crisis or a military conflict, but rather by a single bombshell statement from Donald Trump. In a surprise press conference that reverberated across continents, Trump announced that the United States already maintained a military presence in Greenland and hinted at the possibility of deploying additional troops. This announcement was not just a curious aside in a political saga. It struck at the heart of geopolitical stability in the Arctic, a region already fraught with intense competition for power, resources, and strategic positioning. The geopolitical importance of Greenland cannot be underestimated. With its proximity to key transatlantic sea lanes and its abundance of natural resources, Greenland occupies a pivotal role in any discussion of international security and power dynamics. During the press conference, Trump noted, "Very important. We have a couple of bases on Greenland already, and we have quite a few soldiers, and maybe you'll see more and more soldiers go there." The casual language of this remark belied the gravity of the strategic shift it heralded and spurred immediate panic on Wall Street. Investors reacted with staggering immediacy, and within moments the Dow Jones Industrial Average plummeted by 540 points, while the S&P 500 edged dangerously close to correction territory. The rapid decline underscored an acute fear among market participants that the U.S. might be dragged into an unnecessary military buildup at a time when the global economy was already reeling from the effects of inflation, supply chain disruptions, and rising geopolitical instability. Yet Trump's statements did not end with the military dimension. In an echo of earlier controversial proposals, he revived his 2019 idea of purchasing Greenland, a proposal that had been summarily dismissed by Denmark. Trump took his rhetoric even further by suggesting that Canada in some respects might function best as an American state. Such comments not only stunned allies but also escalated diplomatic tensions to unprecedented heights. Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte quickly responded by firmly rejecting the idea, asserting that NATO had no obligation to support what he termed a ridiculous plan. Meanwhile, a survey of Greenland's population revealed that a whopping 85% of residents opposed any attempt to integrate with the United States. One Greenland resident was particularly emphatic, declaring that their people were not merely commodities on the international market, stating, "We are not a product for sale." While some analysts speculated that this ambitious move could eventually materialize, many pointed out that the unpredictable nature of Trump's statements meant that no one was entirely sure what his true objectives were. The fallout from Trump's series of unprecedented announcements was swift and severe. Over the course of just one day, the U.S. financial markets entered a freefall, with the Dow Jones collapsing by more than 1,400 points, plunging it into negative territory for the year. Major corporations were not spared. Tech behemoths such as Apple, which saw its market capitalization drained by an extraordinary 6.3%, and Nvidia, which experienced a dramatic 7.8% decrease, bore the brunt of investor panic. Even stalwarts like JP Morgan did not escape unscathed, their stocks dropping by 5.9%. The ominous trends extended across the entire fair of indices, with the S&P 500 breaching its 200-day moving average, a condition that typically triggers a cascade of panic selling. The repercussions were felt almost immediately as financial experts began warning that if Trump's erratic policies were allowed to proliferate unchecked, the U.S. could be on the brink of a mild recession by late 2025. In such a scenario, the Federal Reserve might feel impelled to cut interest rates earlier than anticipated, all in a bid to stave off a deeper economic collapse. As the tremors of instability continued, the Biden administration and other Democratic leaders found themselves in a precarious position, forced to wrestle with the dual challenges of economic turbulence and diplomatic chaos that Trump's rapid-fire moves had unleashed. The complex interplay of factors led many experts to advise investors to exercise extreme caution. Recommendations ranged from holding significant cash reserves to steering clear of hefty investments in typically volatile sectors like technology and finance, and instead focusing on industries such as energy and defense that might reap benefits from the ongoing geopolitical turmoil. Amid this maelstrom of uncertainty, the Federal Reserve's next move was keenly anticipated. with market watchers suggesting that any hints of stabilization in interest rates would likely signal a turning point in market dynamics. The current upheaval is reminiscent of an ironic twist of fate when tariffs, once designed as a protective shield for the U.S. economy, turned out to be one of the catalysts of a financial earthquake that day. Despite the original intention to shore up the national economy, these tariffs instead unleashed a wave of panic that culminated in a $4 trillion erasure from the U.S. stock market. Major corporations faced downward spirals, with sectors as critical as technology, transportation, and banking bearing enormous losses. A closer look reveals that companies of all shapes and sizes were ensnared in the ensuing chaos. Apple, a testament to technological prowess with a market cap surpassing $2.7 trillion, saw its stock value plummet by 6.3% in just one trading session, effectively wiping away over $160 billion in value. NVIDIA, at the forefront of the AI chip revolution, experienced a similar fate, losing 7.8% of its market capitalization and roughly $180 billion in value. Perhaps the most dramatic collapse was seen in Tesla, whose stock nosedived by 99.2%, shaving off a staggering $125 billion from its valuation in a single day. A move that underscored the catastrophic ripple effect that Trump's policies had unleashed. It is not only the technology sector that suffered. Beyond the realm of tech behemoths, traditional industries were left reeling as the reverberations of market panic spread like wildfire. The airline industry, for instance, found itself in the eye of the storm. Delta Airlines, one of America's largest carriers, was forced to announce a 50% cut in profit forecasts due to the unrelenting rise in fuel costs, a direct consequence of tariffs imposed by Canada. Delta's stock plummeted by 14%, marking its worst drop in 5 years, while other carriers such as American Airlines and United Airlines were not immune, with their stocks tumbling by 11.2% and 9.8% respectively. The crisis extended its reach into the realm of hedge funds and major investment institutions. Titans of finance such as BlackRock, Vanguard, and Citadel engaged in a massive sell-off, liquidating stocks at a pace that had not been witnessed in over 2 years. In total, an astonishing $240 billion was pulled out from the market in a single day, a move that amplified fears and sent tremors through the entire Wall Street infrastructure. The cascading economic anxiety was not confined solely to the stock market. The banking sector, long considered the backbone of financial stability, was dealt a severe blow as major institutions, including J.P. Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, and Bank of America, experienced declines exceeding 5%. The widespread loss of confidence led to a historic drop in the S&P 500 by 5.7% in a single day, the largest decline since the onset of the 2020 pandemic. The retail sector, too, felt the pressure as soaring production costs and inflationary pressures forced consumer spending to contract. Walmart saw its fortunes diminish as its market capitalization lost $56 billion, while Amazon suffered a 9% drop as consumers began tightening their belts in the face of growing recession fears. Even alternative asset classes, such as cryptocurrencies, which many have come to view as a safe haven during turbulent times, were not spared. Bitcoin experienced a 5% decline, sinking to $42,000, and the entire cryptocurrency market shed more than $200 billion in value within a 24-hour period. The bond market also sent out alarm bells, with the yield on the 10-year U.S. Treasury falling to 4.22%, a classic indicator that investors were scrambling for safe assets amid the rapidly deteriorating stock market. Amid all this chaos, one cannot help but reflect on the paradox of American economic strategy. A trade policy designed to protect domestic industries ended up triggering an economic freefall that left over $4 trillion evaporated from the market almost overnight. The U.S. economy, it seems, was waging an internal battle against itself rather than contending with external global competitors. In this maelstrom of financial and diplomatic uncertainty, one is left pondering the ultimate question: how does an economy of such magnitude let pivotal assets vanish so swiftly in a single day? To add a touch of wry humor to what is otherwise a stark economic diagnosis, one might say that if this trend continues at the current pace, soon even the accountants might start questioning whether their calculators are broken or simply going on strike. In parallel to these dramatic market shifts, Canada has emerged as a resilient counterweight to American economic policy. While the U.S. flounders under the weight of spiraling tariffs and retaliatory measures, Canada has not only maintained its economic stability, but has actively struck back. Canadian authorities swiftly implemented a series of countermeasures aimed directly at American goods. Provinces, such as Ontario and Quebec, took the bold step of removing American liquor from store shelves, causing a precipitous drop in sales of iconic brands like Jack Daniel's and Kentucky Bourbon, declines that exceeded 30% within a month. The economic blow to U.S. producers was compounded by a significant downturn in tourism, as some 65% of Canadians canceled trips to the United States, inflicting over $5 billion in losses on the American tourism and hospitality industry. Border states like New York, Michigan, and Washington are now confronting severe revenue declines, a development that is further exacerbated by a reduction in U.S. exports to Canada by 15%. In an ironic twist, while American tariffs were meant to create a protective economic bubble, they inadvertently isolated the U.S. in a spiraling trade conflict that appears to be accelerating its economic downturn. Political leaders on both sides of the border have not shied away from expressing their discontent. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has been vociferous in his opposition, stating emphatically that Canada will not relent until the U.S. withdraws its unjustified tariffs. Canadian trade experts, including prominent figures like Chrystia Freeland, have lambasted the U.S. approach as the dumbest tariffs in history, arguing that these policies are ultimately self-destructive and harm American interests far more than they affect Canada. Even within the realm of financial policy, Canadian economists like Mark Carney have drawn attention to the long-term consequences of continued protectionist measures, suggesting that the U.S. may suffer enduring economic setbacks if it fails to reverse its course. In stark contrast, Canada has managed to post a robust economic performance, boasting a growth rate of 3.2% amid global uncertainties, while consumer confidence in the Canadian market has soared by 4.7% even as confidence in the U.S. plummets to a decade low. In these trying times, one might cynically remark that the American economic strategy has turned into a self-fulfilling prophecy. At this rate, the U.S. might soon need to auction off its own national monuments just to fund a revised trade policy. These events are further complicated by the actions of two of the largest creditors of the U.S., Japan and China. In a dramatic move that could potentially rewrite the rules of international finance, Japan sold over $20 billion in U.S. treasuries in October 2024. At a time when the Japanese yen hit its weakest level in decades, the government was forced to act decisively, offloading U.S. bonds to bolster domestic economic stability while simultaneously buying yen to prevent further depreciation. This strategic pivot underscores a broader trend among major economic players, a deliberate move away from an over-reliance on U.S. debt. China, too, has been busy reshaping its financial portfolio by reducing its U.S. Treasury holdings from a high of $127 trillion in 2014 to below $800 billion by the end of 2024, the lowest level in over a decade. Beijing's strategy involves diversifying foreign reserves away from the dollar, with a marked shift towards gold and alternative investments. The implications of these moves are profound. When the world's economies begin to question the sanctity of U.S. bonds, the repercussions could include rising interest rates, increased borrowing costs, and ultimately, a significant weakening of American economic dominance. In an environment where every policy decision is magnified and meticulously scrutinized, the possibility of another Trump administration further complicates the outlook. If Donald Trump were to return to the White House, there is speculation that he might use his previous record of protectionist policies to pressure countries like Japan into continuing to purchase U.S. treasuries. However, it remains uncertain whether Japan or any other major creditor would succumb to such pressure if the U.S. persists along its current path. The likelihood of Japan accelerating economic pivoting towards China, the European Union, or other Asian nations increases as it seeks to diversify its investments and mitigate risks associated with U.S. protectionism. The shifting allegiances in global finance raise the critical question, can the United States decouple itself from an overdependence on financial behemoths like Japan and China? Moreover, Could other nations eventually follow suit and reduce their reliance on U.S. debt holdings? The answers to these questions carry enormous significance, as they could very well signal a fundamental realignment in the global financial system, one in which the U.S. dollar's status as the world's preeminent reserve currency is challenged. The ongoing crisis is not merely limited to market indices and stock values. It touches on the very fabric of international economic order. Consider the example of BRICS nations, which have long debated the centrality of the U.S. dollar in global trade. In one of his more provocative public statements early in 2025, President Trump warned that if BRICS countries continue to bypass the U.S. dollar in their international transactions, America would impose a 100% tariff on their goods. This stark ultimatum was aimed squarely at undermining the financial strategies of nations like China, which have worked persistently to reduce their dependence on the dollar. The U.S. dollar, once viewed as the unassailable cornerstone of global finance, now finds itself increasingly challenged by a tide of progressive policies among emerging economies. China, for example, is not only significantly reducing its holdings of U.S. Treasury bonds, but is also bolstering its strategic reserves by adding an additional 250 tons of gold in 2024. This move is emblematic of a broader strategy to insulate its economy from U.S. financial pressure and to build a robust defense against potential sanctions. If these trends continue, we may well be witnessing the early stages of a shift toward a global financial system where gold, and possibly other currencies, could supplant the U.S. dollar as the primary medium of exchange. The chain reaction set off by these developments touches virtually every facet of the international financial system. As Japan and China rewrite the rules, the U.S. is forced to confront several stark realities. With national debt exceeding $34 trillion and borrowing costs set to rise if major investors abandon U.S. bonds, the cost of servicing this debt will invariably lead to cuts in vital public sectors such as healthcare, education, and infrastructure. The spiraling interest rates, in turn, will further dampen economic growth, potentially plunging the nation into a prolonged period of financial uncertainty. The cascade of effects is clear. If American policymakers do not take swift corrective action, the country could face even more severe economic challenges in the years ahead. Challenges that will not only diminish its global influence, but could also have dire consequences for everyday citizens. It is in these turbulent times where careful observation and sober analysis are more critical than ever, that one must also consider the broader implications for international alliances and global trade practices. The economic policies of the United States, long a benchmark for financial stability, are now under intense scrutiny. Questions abound regarding whether the erratic policy shifts, exemplified by the dramatic announcements from Trump, are an indication of deeper structural issues within Washington or simply the result of transient political theatrics. The answer, as is so often the case, likely lies somewhere in between. What remains indisputable is that in the realm of international finance, even minor missteps can ignite crises of monumental proportions. For those tuning in, if you appreciate in-depth and nuanced analysis of these critical economic developments, consider subscribing to our channel. Your engagement, whether through likes, comments, or shares, plays a key role in keeping this important conversation going. It's a subtle reminder that even when the markets are in freefall and policy announcements sound like plot twists from a thriller, staying informed is our best defense against uncertainty. Meanwhile, the consequences of U.S. protectionist measures continue to reverberate well beyond its borders. The economic fallout has been especially pronounced in industrial hubs such as Michigan and Ohio, where job markets and local economies, heavily reliant on automotive exports, have been deeply impacted. Canadian retaliatory actions, including imposing a 15% higher tariff on American cars, have exacerbated struggles for these industries. This situation has forced American businesses to reckon with the possibility that their old assumptions about the invincibility of their economic model might no longer hold true. In a sense, one might quip with a wry smile that the American auto industry is learning a hard lesson in supply and demand. Except in this case, the demand is taking a long vacation. Even as the U.S. grapples with these domestic challenges, the international community watches with bated breath. Trade partners and global investors are acutely aware that the next few months could mark a turning point for the entire international financial system. As Japan and China accelerate their strategies to reduce exposure to U.S. debt, The implications could extend far beyond short-term market fluctuations. Indeed, these moves may signal a fundamental shift in the power dynamics that have long underpinned global finance. The real question now is whether the United States can muster a credible response that will restore stability and confidence in its economic model, or if it will be forced to contend with a new world order in which its financial hegemony is irrevocably diminished. Looking further ahead, the stakes could not be higher. If major countries such as China and other BRICS members continue down the path of reducing their reliance on the U.S. dollar while rapidly increasing their gold reserves, the global financial system might soon experience a seismic shift. Imagine a world where the traditional dominance of the dollar is supplanted by a more diversified financial order, a prospect that could render decades of financial planning and economic forecasting obsolete overnight. Such a scenario would have profound implications not only for multinational corporations and hedge funds, but also for everyday citizens whose savings and pensions might be caught in the crossfire of an international currency realignment. This evolving landscape forces us to revisit some of the core assumptions about global economic stability and the role of fiscal policy in maintaining a balanced market. At a time when consumer confidence in the U.S. is hitting a decade low and the Federal Reserve faces mounting pressure to intervene, the actions of international players provide a sobering contrast. Countries like Canada are thriving under flexible trade policies, while economic giants in Asia are repositioning themselves for a future where the dollar's dominance is no longer a given. Even within the corridors of power in Washington, skepticism is growing about whether current strategies will be sufficient to stave off the impending crisis. Some analysts suggest that the American economy may be heading towards an inadvertent and self-inflicted downturn, one that could, in the worst-case scenario, force a recalibration of fiscal priorities that might look very different from the policies of the past. In the midst of such uncertainty, it is worth pausing to reflect on the interplay between domestic politics and global economic strategy. The dramatic dip in Trump's approval rating to a disconcerting 39%, the lowest since his re-election campaign began, underscores a growing disenchantment among voters who are increasingly losing faith in his approach to governance. This divergence between political rhetoric and economic realities has created a sort of feedback loop where policy missteps lead to market instability, which in turn fuels further political discontent. The ensuing cycle is both fascinating and deeply concerning, as it threatens to undermine the confidence that has long underpinned not only the U.S. financial system, but also the broader international order. And then there is the matter of public opinion. In an era where every controversial policy and every surprising statement can be amplified by social media to global proportions, the collective response of citizens around the world plays an ever more crucial role in shaping the trajectory of economic policy. The robust debate surrounding these issues is a testament to the fact that the global financial system is not merely an abstract concept discussed by economists and policymakers. It is a living, breathing entity that affects the lives of millions. So here's a direct question for all our viewers. How do you think these dramatic shifts in global policy and economic strategy will affect your day-to-day life? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. We value your insight as much as we value keeping you informed. This ongoing saga is a stark reminder of the delicate balance that underpins our global economic system. The actions of one leader, one speech, or one policy shift have the potential to create ripple effects that cascade through markets and across borders. With each new turn in this unfolding drama, from Trump's provocative announcements to Canada's strategic countermeasures, and from Japan's calculated divestments to China's bold move to bolster its gold reserves, the pieces of the international economic puzzle seem to be shifting in ways that could redefine the future of global finance. As we look ahead, the question remains, can the United States pivot effectively and restore balance to its economic policies before more severe consequences take hold? Will the Trump administration, if given another chance, find a way to reconcile its aggressive trade policies with the needs of a modern, globally integrated economy? And perhaps most importantly, as shifting alliances and recalibrated trade relationships continue to emerge, will the world see a renaissance of economic cooperation, or will we witness the gradual unraveling of a system that has long been taken for granted? Before we wrap up this deep dive into the crisis and its far-reaching implications, we invite you to reflect on the weight of these developments. The dramatic internal conflicts within the U.S. economy, the strategic moves by international creditors, and the bold, sometimes reckless policy decisions have all converged to form an intricate tapestry of economic uncertainty. Amidst this complexity, humor, even in its most ironic form, can remind us of the inherent unpredictability of global affairs. After all, if one were to jest, at this point it might seem that the only predictable element is unpredictability itself. We encourage you to remain engaged and informed during these turbulent times. Subscribing to our channel ensures that you stay updated on every twist and turn of this unfolding narrative. Your smart questions, incisive comments, and well-timed likes help foster a community that can navigate even the most complex financial landscapes with clarity and confidence. In conclusion, the vanishing of over $1.4 trillion from the U.S. stock market in just a few hours is more than just a headline. It is a reminder of the delicate interplay between political rhetoric, economic policy, and global market stability. The extraordinary events that have unfolded, from Trump's controversial statements on Greenland and the possibility of military buildup, to the dramatic shifts in trade relations with Canada and the strategic recalibrations by Japan and China, are collectively reshaping the economic world order. We now stand at a crossroads where every decision and every policy nuance carries the potential to influence the future of global finance in profound ways. As the U.S. grapples with its internal challenges and the international community repositions itself in the changing financial landscape, all eyes remain fixed on Washington and its response to these unprecedented developments. It is an era that calls for thoughtful analysis, strategic foresight, and a steady hand on the tiller of economic policy. In this context, every investor, policymaker, and citizen must ask, what is the path forward to restore stability and rebuild confidence in the system? The upcoming months will undoubtedly reveal more about the true cost of these policies and the viability of returning to a more balanced economic order. Your opinions are invaluable in this debate, so please share your thoughts and insights in the comments below. How do you view the current trajectory of these policies? Do you believe that the U.S. can adjust its course in time to avert a deeper crisis? Or are we witnessing the restructuring of the global financial order as we know it? With each comment and discussion, we can collectively discern the subtle signals that might forecast what comes next. In reflecting on this intricate narrative, one might even remark with a touch of sardonic humor that while financial markets are notoriously unpredictable, corporate CEOs and market analysts might soon need to carry umbrellas, not just for rainy days, but for the deluge of unexpected policy storms. Such irony is not lost on those who have closely monitored these events, as even the most seasoned experts now acknowledge that humor can be a modest consolation amidst economic turbulence. The days ahead promise to be as challenging as they are transformative, with every decision in Washington, every shift in global trade, and every measure taken by international creditors echoing far beyond the financial corridors of power. It is an era that demands vigilance and discernment from all who have a stake in the future of our interconnected economies. As we monitor these developments, our priority remains to deliver comprehensive, unbiased insights and robust analysis that helps shine a light on even the darkest corners of global finance. Thank you for joining us on this detailed exploration of one of the most significant economic events in recent history. Stay tuned for our next update, and do take a moment to subscribe, like, and comment to support our efforts in bringing you the most timely and insightful analysis available. Your engagement ensures that our community continues to grow and that we can collectively navigate these challenging times with a well-informed perspective. In a world where one tweet can send markets into a tailspin and a single policy change can rewrite economic realities overnight, it is more critical than ever for each of us to stay informed, question narratives, and contribute our voices to the debate. The decisions made in the halls of power, whether in Washington, Ottawa, Tokyo, or Beijing, will shape the economic landscape for years to come. We invite you to join this journey of exploration and analysis, and to share your perspective on how these profound changes are poised to affect not just Wall Street, but every facet of our daily lives. As we close this chapter on our current analysis, we leave you with an open invitation for dialogue. The path ahead is uncertain, yet the robust exchange of ideas and informed debate remains our best tool in charting a course through turbulent economic waters. What do you think will be the long-term impact of tariffs, trade wars, and shifting global alliances on the U.S. economy and the wider world? Your opinions matter, and we eagerly await your comments and discussions. Together, we will continue to monitor these critical developments and provide you with the insights needed to understand and navigate this rapidly evolving financial landscape. Stay informed, stay engaged, and as always, thank you for being a part of our community.